So, Lone Rider here, and just want to throw something out there. The term fake news is used a lot, both by the left and the right, to basically try and describe things they don't agree with or believe are misleading. I have really nothing to say about that one way or the other. Everybody's got their own agenda and everybody's got their own take on things. And some people are misleading and some people aren't. But there is real fake news out there in the sense of things that present actual historical fact in a way that it didn't happen, or by leaving an awful lot out. And this is something that is near and dear to me because as a cyclist and as somebody who lives in Union County, I was involved for many years, for about 3 years, in the effort to get mountain bike access at Watchung, which coincided not with the promised mountain bike access that had been voted on, approved, and even paid for, but rather with the closure of every park in the county to mountain biking. We started out, Watchung Reservation was closed to mountain biking, and it was free Watchung, and overturned the ban that's existed for 20-odd years after it was concocted by the unelected behind closed doors out of whole cloth. And what started out as end the mountain bike ban at Watchung and get access at Watchung ended up with the government killing mountain bike access at every park in the county. The history of the mountain bike ban itself, how it was concocted by the unelected behind closed doors without documentation, by the government's own admission in legal documents and Freedom of Information Act, Open Public Record Act requests, which are the local and county version of the same thing. The government's own admission in these OPRA request was that they never had a single documentation of a single instance of user conflict, trail damage, environmental damage from mountain biking. They never did any trail studies or environmental surveys or anything prior to closing the park to mountain biking. Basically it was just that there was a handful of people who were really loud and who really didn't like mountain biking. And so the unelected government officials from the county parks department got together behind closed doors in 1995 and basically created a ban out of whole cloth. And that's by the government's own admission. So is the fact that this was done behind closed doors and without any public knowledge or input at the time. And we can see that not only in the government's own admission in an Open Public Record Act request response to an OPRA request that I filed at the time, but we can see that in contemporaneous news coverage. There was no news coverage of the debate over the ban because there was no debate. The ban was just created behind closed doors and imposed without anybody even knowing that it was going on. But after it was enacted, there were a handful of news articles about the reaction, and one of them was very telling. It was in the Star-Ledger, a regional New Jersey newspaper at the time, and it talked about cyclists who were concerned that the ban was going to result in prohibition of riding on the road through the park, that nobody knew what the penalties would be, whether it would be applied to road riding or whether it would be applied to mountain biking on the trails in the park. Nobody knew, were they going to assess a fine if you were stopped? Were they going to seize your property? Were they going to put you in prison? Nobody knew what the penalty would be. Nobody knew what the law applied to, or I should say the ban applied to. And the whole reason for this is that there was no law. There was no ordinance that anybody could just, if this had been something that was done in an above-board fashion by the freeholders passing an ordinance or a law, anybody could look up and see not only what it applied to and what it specifically forbade, but also what the penalties would be if you were caught committing an infraction of that rule. However, a policy that's created behind closed doors without any public input, without any public knowledge, and without any legislative authority in particular is going to breed questions. There would be no questions if there was specific legislative authority, and that's the whole problem here, that this ban on mountain biking, to me, this has always been bigger than mountain biking. Obviously, as a cyclist, I wanted park access. But it's always been bigger than mountain biking, because once I got involved in looking into this, I very quickly realized that it was actually more about misgovernment than it was about mountain biking. It was about, how do you want your leaders, your political figures, the people who supposedly represent you, how do you want them to conduct themselves? And while nobody expects these people to be saints, I think we all agree that we don't expect them to conduct themselves like villains. And sadly, that's what they've been doing. What they did in 1995 when they banned mountain biking extra legally in a backroom meeting, and what they've been doing ever since. And the very fact that not only they admitted this in a Open Public Record Act response, that it was done behind closed doors by the unelected without any public input or knowledge, but that contemporaneous news coverage in reaction to the prohibition at the time was filled with such uncertainty. People making statements like, well, I don't know exactly what the rule applies to, and I don't know what the penalty will be, and therefore we're afraid to even go anywhere near the park, even on the road. Would questions like that exist if this was something that was clearly denoted in an ordinance or a law? And the answer is no. The very fact that those uncertainties and those questions existed is evidence that there was no clear and specific law or ordinance spelling out this prohibition. Because, of course, unelected officials meeting behind closed doors in a secret cabal don't exactly pass laws or ordinances. That's the province of the legislative body of the government, which at the county level is the freeholders, not a handful of goons from the Public Parks Department. But the news coverage on the subject was notoriously lackluster. The facts were out there. People like me had spent years digging them up. I even had to sue the government at one point to get some of their Open Record Act responses, because they were declining to provide them, and they were basically abusing Oprah exceptions to say that, well, we can't respond to this request. And finally, I had to sue them. Now it was settled before it ever came to a courtroom, but the point is, they had to not only, pay their own attorney, whatever he charged, they also had to pay mine. Why would somebody, spend thousands and thousands of dollars? I mean, obviously, you could say, well, it's taxpayers' money, it's not their money, it's not coming out of their pocket. But why would somebody even put themselves in the position of that, to try and hide something, right? Unless they had something to hide. And like I said, the local news articles on the subject were lackluster, were basically missing the whole point. A lot of the local news coverage, such as it was just blatantly bogus. And then recently I just did a Google search, just out of curiosity, mountain biking and Watchung Reservation, and the Wikipedia entry for the subject came up. And they describe it as a controversy originating in 2017, when mountain biking advocates sought to introduce, and that's an important phrase, introduce mountain biking to the park. Not reintroduce mountain biking to the park, not repeal the ban on mountain biking or remove the ban on mountain biking that was imposed in 1985, but introduce mountain biking to the park. So according to Wikipedia, there had been no mountain biking prior to 2017. I guess the people who contributed to the Wikipedia article weren't alive in the 1980s and the 1990s, because mountain biking at Watchung had been going on from the 1980s up through 1995 until a bunch of guys got together in a backroom meeting without any public knowledge or input and decided to stick their hands in the air and say, by the power of Grayskull, mountain biking is now banned at Watchung. Yeah, but apparently, according to Wikipedia, all this was about an effort by mountain bikers to introduce mountain biking to the park in 2017. Not about the fact that mountain biking had been arbitrarily and extra-legally banned in an end run around the electoral process and public input in 1995 by the unelected, without any specific legislative authority, done in secret, without any public input, and, all the stuff that goes along with that. Nope. Your government's going to basically conduct itself like a villain, like Darth Vader, like whatever, And people are going to be okay with it. And they're going to talk about it as if it's no big deal, and they're going to just totally ignore. They're going to take something that goes back 25 years, and they're just going to talk about the last 2 years of it or 3 years of it, as if nothing else ever happened. And I'm going to be honest, this is very frustrating. As somebody who was there, who spent time and effort on this, not only was I there as a cyclist in 2014, 2015 when this effort started. It didn't start in 2017. That was when the government finally decided to go back on its word that it had been saying for 2 or 3 years it was going to allow mountain biking. That was when the government, after the fact, after it had already publicly stated and voted to approve a trail plan that allowed mountain bike access in Watchung, instead turned around and canceled the trail plan, but never changed the contract of the consultant had hired. So presumably they were getting paid for, stuff related to the mountain bike trail plan that they had approved, they had voted on. They had actually changed the contract for the consultant CMA Associates specifically to pay them more for the mountain bike part of the trail plan. Then that was canceled, but they never changed the contract back. And that's not me saying this. This is what the government itself said in Open Public Record Act responses. I specifically said I want an amended version of the contract, that postdates the vote to cancel the mountain bike trail plan. And they said there's no such thing in a legal document, in an Open Public Record Act request response. So according to the government itself, it's an established legal fact that these people are getting paid for something that they're not having to do because the trail plan was canceled, but the contract was never changed back. Very fishy. This is very disturbing, and it's annoying when you read. Annoying, right? Annoying is somebody blasting the music too loud. Annoying is somebody bumping into you while you're walking because they're talking on their cell phone and they're not looking where they're going. Misgovernment of this magnitude isn't annoying. It's dangerous. It's disturbing. It's frightening. Right? If they're going to abuse power on such a small issue, generally speaking, like mountain bike access. I mean, mountain bike access is important to me as a cyclist, but in the big picture, it's not really a big issue. But if this is how they're going to conduct themselves on a relatively small issue like this, how are they conducting themselves on much bigger and more, widely important issues? And I don't think we can say to ourselves they're doing any different, right? It's the same people, and they're going to use the same judgment and the same morals, or lack thereof. And I find it very disturbing that the media coverage from the local newspaper to the local news to press releases issued by the county, which are worth about as much as, well, I don't have to go into that, to the Wikipedia entry on the subject, right? I mean, just the fact that the Wikipedia entry starts in 2017, when the controversy actually goes back to when mountain biking was first banned in 1995. I mean, not for nothing. And then the fact that they describe it as mountain biking advocates seeking to introduce mountain biking. And again, the terminology here is important. Introduce mountain biking implies that it wasn't going on beforehand. It was. If anything, they should have said repeal the ban on mountain biking or reintroduce mountain biking. But either of those would have necessitated examining the conduct of the government in the prior 20-odd years. Because, again, it's not like mountain biking had never happened at Watchung, which is the impression you get when you hear, well, in 2017, mountain bike advocates sought to introduce mountain biking. No, mountain biking had no need of being introduced to Watchung because it had already been going on there for years until it was banned extra legally by the government. So, if anything, this was a reintroduction of mountain biking and or a repeal or paring back of the government's ban. But of course, they don't want to have to talk about the government's ban. They don't want to have to talk about the real history of what's going on. They don't want to have to talk about the facts. And so you get a real-life version of what people call fake news. And I think whatever your politics, whatever your political persuasion, we should all agree, and again, the term fake news is very politically charged, but I think we should all agree that stuff that's being reported on as if it's current events should be true, okay? It should be accurate, as accurate as possible, and it shouldn't leave out entire parts of it shouldn't leave out, you have, let's say, 28 years right, of stuff going on. So you're going to leave out 25 of those years and just report on the last 3. Is it just me, or is that dishonest at some point, right? Flagrantly dishonest, and it is. And it bothers me, because I was there, I spent effort on this, I was one of the people who helped get the facts out there, and then these facts are now being ignored. And, it is frustrating. And so, when it comes to the term fake news, there is, like I said, people have agendas and they throw the term around, but there actually is real fake news out there. It's stuff like this. And I guess the thing to think about is, what does it mean, right? What are the implications? Well, a citizenry that's not informed about what's really going on isn't going to be able to fight it. A citizenry that doesn't really know what happened isn't really going to know what's happening now, and isn't going to be able to object to it. And, people who are just lied to about what happened over the last 20 years, well, is there any reason to trust what people say going forward in the next 20? I mean, not for nothing. Now, it's frustrating to me because, like I said, I was there, I spent effort on this, I helped get these facts out there, and now they're just being disregarded. But at the end of the day, I know what really happened, right? I know what the truth is. I know what the reality is, right? Because I was there, and these people weren't. So at some point, yes, it's frustrating, yes, it's annoying, yes, it's fake, but at the same time, that fraud can't supplant reality, right? Reality is what it is. It exists independently of our acknowledgement of the fact. And if you act in a way that disregards it, sooner or later it catches up to you. So, people can try and lie and hide and stick their heads in the sand like ostriches and, this, that, there, and the next thing on various issues. Whether it's something relatively mundane in the big picture, like mountain bike access at the local park, or whether it's some big national thing. But at the end of the day, the people who are involved know what the truth is. And the people who know them know what the truth is. And the people they talk to know what the truth is. And maybe this is the way to counteract this fake stuff, right? Just word of mouth. Just people talking to each other as people, just, conversing, spreading truth. And, the truth is, unfortunately, that there's almost a built-in reason to preserve the status quo. I mean, nobody wants to have to backtrack and admit they were wrong, right? Because then it opens up their credibility to all sorts of other things. So I, on one hand, I kind of get why at a certain point, just to preserve stability, people aren't going to want to have to admit past mistakes. That doesn't make it right, that doesn't make it truthful, that doesn't make it honest. But it makes it something where, I can be vehemently opposed to that, I can be disgusted by it, I can be nauseated by it, but at least I can understand why people take that view. And I think with a lot of these issues, especially the ones that occur at a local level, or a county level, like the mountain biking thing at Watchung, I think part of the problem is who gets assigned to that, right? Probably some low-level reporter who doesn't have any incentive or reason to do any serious research, and who has no real, skill or whatever, because they're new and they're a noob, basically. And part of this, I think, goes to people's lack of understanding of the complexities of these issues. Even a simple issue like park access can be indicative of something greater, can be indicative of the conduct of your government, generally speaking. This issue had many facets. On the surface, it was just about mountain bike access and an unfair ban that arbitrarily excluded members of the public from using the trails in a public park that they paid for, without any reason or justification or a documentation of a single problem with mountain biking. But that's just on the surface. So on the surface, this was about basically fair park access and mountain bike access. in the sense of the bigger picture, though, what was this about? It was about how your government conducts itself, which is a hell of a lot more important than just the issue of mountain bike access. And that's the thing that people were missing, I think. I think local media, even Wikipedia in this case, just saw this as an issue about mountain biking. They didn't see this as an issue of how your government conducts itself, the relationship between the government and the citizen, the honesty and integrity and trustworthiness of people in government, the attempts by people in government to make decisions behind closed doors in an end run around the electoral process and all its protections, and the very idea of citizen knowledge and input. All of that kind of fell by the wayside. All people saw was the surface phenomenon, the issue of mountain bike access, which obviously is important to me as a cyclist. But like I said, once I started to get involved in this from a very early time, I very quickly realized it was about something bigger. It was about what kind of country we want to live in. How do we want our government to conduct itself? What's the proper relationship between the people who say they speak for you and you? And that is the type of thing that got swept by the wayside and completely ignored. You know, people have been spending 20 years talking about the conduct of some allegedly rude mountain biker 20 years ago, which of course was never documented. I mean, by the government's own admission in its Open Record Act responses, they had no documentation of a single incident of trail user conflict, injury or environmental damage at Watchung related to mountain biking. They never did any trail studies at Watchung. They never did any environmental impact surveys, anything. They just arbitrarily banned it because some people didn't like mountain biking. Here's the thing. You can endlessly debate what a single mountain biker may or may not have done 20 years ago. But how about what the government's done every day in the 20 years since? Right? We can start with the fact that, they lied to people and misled people and tricked people and threatened people and intimidated people. Hell, one of the reasons I had to sue the government was because there was a series of email exchanges between the county parks department and the county police department, where the county police officials told people in the county parks department they could not threat to confiscate people's bikes for riding in the park because the ordinance that they cited, that they claimed forbade mountain biking, even though it didn't. It predated the ban by over 10 years. It was about riding your bike on roads, sidewalks, paths, and not blocking cars. It wasn't about the trails in the park. By the government's own admission, it couldn't be read that way, etc. But the point is, this is an ordinance that they claimed. Now, the ordinance is from 1983. The ban on mountain biking is from 1995. And the ordinance wasn't linked to the ban that occurred over 10 years later until 20 years after that, in around 2014, 2015, when I started filing Open Record Act requests. And I was apparently the first person in the history of Union County to say, well, what ordinance is this? And that's the first time in history this ordinance was linked in writing to the ban that preceded it by 12 years was 20 years after that. I mean, nothing is above board here. This is very suspicious. But whether or not the ordinance was about mountain biking is almost beside the point. It wasn't. Again, the ban was created by the unelected behind closed doors. The fact that they might have tried to repurpose an old ordinance that predated that by over 10 years later, that's neither here nor there. The point of the unelected don't pass ordinances. Right? But whether or not the ordinance was about mountain biking or not, the point is, by the county parks department's request and the response of the county police department in this Open Record Act request email that they tried to hide and didn't want to share in the Open Record Act request response, I had to sue them to get it. The reason I had to sue them to get it was because the county police department said to the county parks department, the ordinance that you claim justifies the ban on mountain biking, again, whether it does or not, does not authorize confiscation of property. The penalty is a small fine. So even if this was about mountain biking, which of course it isn't, but the point is, from their standpoint, looking at it as if it was, it still didn't justify the threat to confiscate people's property. When you consider what a decent mountain bike costs, I mean, hell, that could be grand larceny, right? They knew this because the county police department told them. But yet they still published a threat to confiscate your bike if you rode it in any county park, not just Watchung. And of course the ban on Watchung was only ever about Watchung. It was only 20 years later when they put up new signs creating new trail closures at other parks. I mean, you can go back to the original mountain biking white paper written by Daniel Benier of the Union County Parks Department in 1995, it only ever talks about Watchung. It doesn't say anything about other county parks. The whole effort was to, in 1995, create an arbitrary ban on mountain biking at Watchung. But I guess somebody finally decided, hey, if we're going to pretend there's an ordinance that authorizes this, well, an ordinance would apply countywide. Either that or it was just, payback for mountain bikers trying to get fair park access. They said, we'll show you. We'll just close every trail in the county. So instead of getting access to mountain biking at Watchung, we lost access to every trail in every county park. The point is that they were threatening to confiscate your bike if you rode it in the park. The ordinance that they claimed, even though it didn't, that they claimed authorized this, didn't authorize confiscation of property. And the county police department told them that. They said it was misleading to put this on signs and flyers. Now, they didn't put the threat to confiscate your property on signs, but they did put it on flyers that were posted by the thousands throughout the park system after they were explicitly told in this email chain by the county police that they were not legally authorized to make that threat, that it was not a legal penalty, but rather it was an extra legal act, and that it was misleading to make that threat. And they did it anyway. Is it any wonder I had to sue them to get that information? This is the conduct of our government. And like I said, if they're going to engage in this type of conduct at a local level or county level on a relatively mundane issue like bike access, how the hell are they conducting themselves in other areas, right? And it's a shame that all these facts are going unknown, and you have misreporting, you have a Wikipedia entry that's misleading, etc. But at the end of the day, I was there. I know what the hell happened, right? I don't need Wikipedia to confirm that for me. Now, yes, it's going to misinform, potentially, thousands of people if they read that Wikipedia, maybe millions of people, if they read that Wikipedia entry and take it as, in any way accurate. Yes, it's going to mislead them. That does bother me. But at the end of the day, I was there. I put in the effort. I know what happened. All right, I know what the truth is, and you can lie and fib and stretch and do all kinds of stuff, but you can't kill the truth, right? It is what it is, right? And you can try and stretch it for a while or get away with dodging it, but at some point, reality comes back around and people realize exactly what's going on. And as frustrating it is to see this kind of, again, fake news, to use the term, yeah, it's frustrating. But, again, I know what the truth is. I don't need somebody to tell me what the truth is. I was there for 3 years. I know what the damn truth is, right? I filed the Open Record Act request. I waded through the government documents. I worked with other cyclists, other members of the public who were concerned about fair trail access. I helped get to the bottom of this. I did the research. I read the Open Record Act responses. I did follow up Open Record Act requests. I followed up on those.